Once again, from the studios of UNO Television on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, consider this, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
It must have been cold there in my shadow to never have sunlight on your face. You were content to let me shine, that's your way. You always walked a step behind. So I was the one with all the glory, while you were the one with all the strength. A beautiful face without a name for so long, a beautiful smile to hide the pain. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle.
Who is the wind beneath your wings, and how will you deal with their loss? Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, grief. Joining us to talk more about it are Janet Roberts, Executive Director for the Centering Corporation in Omaha and Creative Director of Grief Digest Magazine, and Nancy Fullwood, here today to share her personal story. Thank you both for being here and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. Janet, how do you define grief?
How I would define grief is an intense feeling of sorrow. And grief can be not just the death of a loved one, but it can be loss of a pet, job deployment. So there are many aspects of grief, but I would say an intense feeling of sorrow.
Yeah, and it plays out so differently in every single person. Why is that?
Everybody grieves in their own unique way. And I've had a couple people just this last week where they have called and they've said, it's been a year since my wife has died and I don't feel that much better. When am I going to get better? And for every person, grief is unique. Some people take a very, very long time. Some people take a shorter amount of time. Everybody grieves differently, therefore it takes everybody a different amount of time and a different way to grieve. Some people read books, some people pray, some people meditate, some people do physical activities. You never know what is going to be the best way to resolve the grief that you feel, but everybody has to go through it somehow.
Mm-hmm. And Nancy, you've been introduced to grief.
Yes.
If you don't mind, share your story with us.
Well, I actually met the folks at Centering Corp when the loss of a pet. That's the first time I met with them. And I was just, the pet was very young, mm-hmm. and I just couldn't believe that, this was going to happen to such a young dog. Mm-hmm. And they were so comforting and so reassuring. And I couldn't believe these people, how warm and caring they were. Basically, I'd only been there a couple times before the time that Georgie passed away. And to come in, and I was just so shook up thinking I'd done everything possibly, to help her to get better. And here she died, and I felt all the warmth and comfort that I, could possibly have from like strangers. And then from then on we formed a relationship, a friendship. Mm-hmm. And since that time I've had a lot to do with them, just a lot, not only through animals but through humans. And one of the things, I guess I would say, not just grief from death, but I've learned that, grief from separation of a family member, whether it's a mother, father, or sister, or brother, divorce, you name it. People are suffering from all kinds of losses, and that the Centering Corp is open to helping you through the grief process of not only losing someone to death.
And Janet, she's mentioned the Centering Corporation a few different times in her response. Tell us about the organization.
Sure. Centering Corporation was started by my mother and stepfather back in the 70s. And there really weren't a lot of resources for grief and loss back then. My stepfather was a chaplain, and Joy was a social worker. And they would go to the hospitals and they would talk to people who had a loss. And they realized that a lot of doctors and nurses didn't know how to talk to the patients. So they went around to different hospitals around the United States and they did patient education, and that's before it was even a word. But they would hold workshops and they would give the doctors and nurses skills to help the bereaved parents. They also discovered there weren't a lot of books and resources for the bereaved parents themselves, so they wrote them. And they started publishing about 9 books that we still carry today. And they're written so they're educational, they inform people about what grief and loss is, how they can help themselves and let other people help them. And since then, we've expanded to just a few books to thousands of resources on grief and loss. But it all started with them wanting to help people who were bereaved and help the caregivers as well.
And how long ago was this?
1978 they started.
Okay, 1978. And so what I always find fascinating, especially when you look at a couple like them getting started, we fast forward and today this is the largest resource center in the country. But I was reading somewhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, that really this started with some coloring books, right?
It did start with
share
some
more about that,
coloring.
because I found that fascinating.
Sure. They did start out with 9 little coloring books for children who were in the hospital. A couple of them we still have, and like tonsillectomies, x-rays, things that they would see in the hospital, and they really thought that would be kind of their entrepreneurship, what they would do. But they did find that when something happened to the child in the hospital, there was nothing, for the parents, and there was nothing for the staff. And that really was when they decided to expand. But we still have some of those coloring books today.
That just is so amazing, and I think it's so important that people understand where, especially an organization like this, started. And here we are years later, turning into the largest, and as the largest, I guess you guys would serve really as a hub, right, for the country. What is the most commonly asked question that you get at Centering Corp, and what is your response to that?
That goes back to, how long is this going to last? I mean, I'm tired of grieving. I just want to be normal again. And unfortunately, you're never normal again. You have to find your new normal. And but that would be the most common questions. How long? How long?
So many people, Janet and Nancy, chime in here, are so afraid of emotion, right? And we have lots of emotions when we're going through that process. We're angry, we're frustrated, we're sad, we're depressed. A lot of things come into play. Talk to our viewers about emotions and how common they really are, and maybe more importantly, how do we know if we're responding or reacting the right way to be able to move forward successfully?
I've been doing this for a really long time. I remember I was a little girl when they started Centering Corporation, and I was in the basement, and I remember them talking about if a woman lost a baby, she didn't tell anybody about it. They didn't talk about it. It was kind of a hush-hush. If a parent lost a child, they had to go back in a week. They maybe got a week off work, maybe just a few days off work, and they didn't talk about it, and the coworkers didn't talk about it, and the family didn't often talk about it. I would say now things are so much different because you can talk about it. It's okay if a man cries. It's okay to take some time off work. It's okay to remember your baby. It's okay to grieve the loss of your pet. So I think it's a good thing that we can express all these emotions now, but then maybe people are afraid because they're not sure, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? And there's really no right or wrong way to grieve or any emotion that you have to feel or shouldn't feel. So I think we're learning that it really is a unique process that we all go through.
Well, and one of the things I think that happens to people is just when you think you have a handle on grief, there's a song like we had at the beginning of the taping. There's a song that comes up, or someone mentions a phrase or a quote or says something a certain way, and all of that really begins to flood back. For those of us on the outside looking in who are witness to that, what's the best way for us to respond, if we're to respond even at all, when we can truly sense that someone's going through that again?
Right, and I know that just being present and not always having to say anything, but just letting them know that you're there, because oftentimes people will say, it just came out of nowhere and I just started crying and just had, I've been fine for months, and then all of a sudden something triggered it and I just was out of control. But I think if you say, it's okay, it's healing. Crying is good. It's part of the healing process, or being upset or having moments of sadness. It takes a long time to grieve, and sometimes it comes back in waves, and you never know when that's gonna come.
We have a third guest today who is chomping at the bit, literally, to be on television. And who can blame Mackenzie? So we'll bring Mackenzie out and we'll introduce Mackenzie to our viewers. Nancy, tell us about this dog. So Mackenzie, we'll have your big appearance now, and we'll learn all about you, and then you can have some treats with maybe our production folks.
That's right. Mackenzie's just a puppy. She's a special puppy, but
adorable puppy. Yes.
As Janet knows, everyone's known me with my Savannah, who lived almost 13 years, was a chow, and of course they helped me tremendously in overcoming the loss of Savannah, who passed away December 2nd last year. So then I took several months before I decided to, find another dog, and in tribute to Savannah, I wanted to get another chow, which was really difficult. You don't find them around here. I found it on puppyfind.com, and Janet was looking different places too to find us, and so she's flown on 2 airplanes to get here, and she's really a joy. And the person I bought her from said she's just pure happiness. And so the name her happiness. Her name is Mackenzie Francis, after St. Francis. But she's just a joy. But I wanted to say, when Janet, you were saying, people grieving, people say so much, people tell me how I'm supposed to grieve, or this is too short, or this is too long, or why I'm not crying. I'm supposed to cry for a day or 2 or a month, or I'm not supposed to. I don't cry, yet I'm hurting, and all that. The people at Centering Court and the materials, particularly the people, help you to know that however you grieve, it's okay. And you don't have to model after somebody else, or a length of time, or a short period of time, or a long period of time. It's an individual thing, and we all know that we're here temporarily, and we're comforted by knowing if we've done, good here on earth, that, we leave in peace and, are with the Supreme Being after that. And I think they help you to know that the person that has passed, has gone on to a good life, and you're pleased that they have done so well on earth, and that they're at peace now. No long suffering or anything of that nature.
Nancy, from a big picture perspective, having gone through the loss that you did, none of us can really know in terms of timing and how that plays out. I mean, did you wake up one day and say, okay, I think I'm ready now to consider having another dog, or was it something that was encouraged by your friends and family, or really, because I think we'll have viewers, and unless you own a pet and become attached to a pet, it's really hard to understand how close-knit you can be with your animal. When did you know? And
I think you're right. I guess I'd like to say I pondered it quite a while, because I think, is this too soon, or is this not long enough, or do I want to start out, with a new puppy, going through the training. She's been very easy to train, but you never know what that's going to be like. Should I rescue one? And I still came back to that. I wanted to honor, Savannah the chow and get another chow. But I think pondering it and prayer did a lot to know that this is the time. And I'll search around, and it's not as easy as you might think. You go through the internet, and you have to just, understand your gut feelings, because some things on there, I talked to several people, and it might be that it was going to be a scam. This isn't going to work. Will you send the money tomorrow? That kind of thing. Well, no. Oh, and you never hear from them again, that kind of thing. So it was a process. And I had many text messages and many emails, or text messages, and phone calls from the guy who I purchased her from. And I felt, it was really worth it, because it was a different situation. I can't really explain what we went through with this person I don't know, and will probably never know, and the risk you take, and it was worth it. And I felt this person told a lot of personal problems, personal concerns, and we kind of got into that. I feel as if I know you, and I want to trust you with my puppy, that kind of thing. So it was a process. So it wasn't something you just jumped up overnight and moved into.
Well, looking at the two of you, it's certainly proof that everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
And we can tell that this is Mackenzie's first appearance on television. Very exciting as it is for most people, and as we see here, dogs. And so thank you very much for sharing that story. And Janet, as the resource, anything else that you can suggest to viewers in terms of resources when we've lost a pet, for example, a book or a certain site that people can go to?
We have lots of good books for pet loss, and for children and adults. And a lot of times children, this is their first experience with death. And so if you can give them some resources and some help to guide them, how they handle this loss can really help them in future losses and grief situations that they are in. So it's really important. But we have journals, DVRs. Some people just want a small handout. Some people want to journal and make a little keepsake for their pet. So we determine what would be the best resource for them when they come in individually.
Okay, and I'm going to strike a few more chords here in terms of just kind of examples, and if we could approach it broad strokes. So people who have lost a spouse, very, very difficult. There's never an easy time, but my heartstrings are always tugged at when these people have been married 50 plus years, and you go to sleep one night and that person's in your life, and you wake up the next day and they are not. What's your advice to those folks?
Right, and my mother was married to my stepfather for 37 years. He died in March, and he had cancer, esophageal cancer, for 5 years, and she had watched him every day, get a little weaker and weaker and die. And like grief, I think that, the way the person died, like if it was a long-term illness, if it was sudden, I would say I have different books for different, how the death occurred. If it was a strained marriage, if they were newlyweds or a long-term marriage, different books for that. And then I have some general books that might be for journaling, just keepsakes, some DVDs, some CDs, whatever, or just practical information. So it really depends on the individual. But how they deal with that, some want to go to support groups, some want to read a lot, some want to just have a little time by themselves. And so we're there when they need them. We've had people buy books, and then I'll get a call, well, I had your books, but I didn't touch them for 3 months. I'm like, oh, but just having them there, they said, was helpful. Knowing that they were there when I was ready to pick up a book made all the difference in the world.
And to your point, you know, marriages last different lengths of time, and it's not always the time, it's the meaning behind any relationship, right? What would be a good resource, for example, for teenagers to tap into?
Interesting. I am one of my favorite resources, and I was a part of creating, was a journal called Fire in My Heart, Ice in My Veins. And I had a loss as a teenager, and my mother gave me a book that was meant for adults, and she wanted that to help me. And I just was like, Mom, this book is for, you know, adults. I'm, you know, 18. This isn't for me. And a few years later, I came back to Centering Corporation, is when I really started full time and helped create this journal, Fire in My Heart, Ice in My Veins. And one thing I know for teenagers, if they can write, that's the best thing for them, because I've had losses as a teenager and a young adult, and your memories fade as you get older. So it's really nice to have that written journal that you can look back and say, oh my gosh, I forgot all about this. And then say, oh my gosh, I went through such a rough time and I made it through. And I'm better, you know, and I can laugh at the funny memories, and I can remember all the good times and not feel that sadness. So I think journaling for teens is really important. We have a website, fireinmyheart.com. It's a great blog for teenagers. And I think just for them to share, whether it's online or in a journal, is really important.
Okay, and what about children? Little kids.
Children.
Yeah, sometimes they're tough to read, and sometimes we don't give them enough credit for what they really do understand that's going on. So what would be your suggestion there?
I've heard somebody say before that, you know, as adults, we kind of, you know, we're set. You know, we go to work, we do our laundry on Monday, we go to the store on Tuesday. But children, they're changing all the time. So for this, I mean, they adapt better, they can change more, they're more, you know, freer, so they can play and think about playing and do that way. And then they can be sad because they remember, oh, Mom's not here, you know. So for children, I think it's important for you to say, you know, if you're sad, it's okay to cry. You know, if I cried, you know, it's okay. It's just I'm remembering, but you can play and you can, you know, have fun as well. And so you know, let them be a kid while they're grieving. They'll do it on their own, you know, the way they need to.
Kathy, I'd like to jump in here because not only loss of a parent or a spouse or anything, Janet and the Centering Corp people reach out to everyone. What my last experience was with, what about when you lose your country, when you lose it's behind you and you move on to another new country. My neighbors are from Myanmar, and they've just been so wonderful to accept them, and I think that's would be a wonderful idea for the teenagers to journal. I mean, they were in refugee camps, they were children, there's 6 of them, I'm grandma to them, and they looked to grandma to, you know, help us to adjust to all this, and the mom and dad, because the language is, you know, very difficult for them to do it, but knowing how they were tortured there, and to come here and try to start over, come here to try to get a job. They were so nurturing, so kind, and so caring when we visited them to get help and strength. And I think they're journaling now that they can really write well, that this would really be good for them, because the older ones, you know, remember some of the things that they went through, and they told me soldiers would just come and, you know, break in and either burn your house down, rape you, or kill you. Now, the 2 little ones in this family, the little boy was born here, and the little girl was 6 months old when they got here. But just me envisioning what they went through to try to get here, and they like to say they're really now from Thailand because it was so horrible in Myanmar, and they did get over to Thailand where they were in refugee camps, but they were treated more humanely. So they generally say we're from Thailand, you know. But anyway, the Centering Corp just answered a lot of questions. It filled a need that they have in helping to self-stabilize and get a job, learn how to fill out an application, learn how to feel good about yourself, that you can talk to, you know, potential employers. I mean, you know, because I went with them like, I don't even understand what you're saying, let alone these young people, you know.
And there's you know, post-traumatic stress syndrome is huge, especially with all the military and, you know, leaving the country and just homicide and all the trauma that goes on, and that's a big issue right now.
You ladies are bringing up such good points here. We all can get so caught up in our own lives that it's hard to even recognize that a Janet or a Nancy may be going through something, let alone knowing how to chip away at how I reach you to be able to trust me enough to open up. In just the minutes that we have remaining, what are some general characteristics of grief?
I would say, if you see somebody that's sad or maybe disconnecting a little bit, to just make sure to reach out to them and let them know that we're here, or that they have a support system, because when you leave your country or you have a loss, you don't feel like anybody understands or cares, or just if you can let them know that you care and they have people around them that are willing to help, and just reach out and show your support.
Well, and sometimes it's just listening. It's asking somebody, how are you? And then really listening for the response versus, how we tend to ask to be polite, but then we move forward and don't really stop to listen. Nancy, we've got about a minute left. Advice for our viewers watching.
Well, I was just thinking too, the little children in the greeting when my Savannah died, they were like, want to know, how do you feel, Grandma? Do you cry? I feel very sad. And I think, well, your point, listening and being there for them. Even if the little kids are saying, I feel so sad too. It hurts me. I don't see Savannah anymore. They didn't even really know much about dogs, until they came here, or life.
Just
and
to
I
be
think
able
the
to
listening
open up,
and communicate, and people to take time, you said too.
Well, I want to make sure that we get your website up for our viewers, because you really are an amazing resource and one that probably few really know about. So this is really
true.
exciting
I
to
learned
be
this
talking
at
about this today. So
at a
let's go ahead and
luncheon.
put that up. If folks want more information, largest and oldest, resource center of this type in the country. We're talking today about Centering Corporation. You can log on to centering.org, 866-218-0101. Ladies, thank you so much for being here, and to
thanks for
Mackenzie as
having
well.
us.
Thanks for bringing her.
having
She
us.
was the life of the program. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.